How to lose weight fast, naturally, and permanently. Even though keto has provided some great results for a lot of people, there are still some whose metabolism, whose bodies are so stubborn that they're not getting the results that they want. So first, I just want to put it in perspective a little bit, because a lot of people come into my office, and whether it's for pain or weight loss or whatever their issue is, they say sometimes, I just want to get out of pain. I just want to lose the weight. And that is never true. That is not what they really mean. Because you could lose weight by just stop eating, stop drinking water, you'll lose the fluid, go sit in the sauna and sweat it all out. You could probably lose 10, 15 pounds before you pass out and they take you to the emergency room. So it's not at any cost. What people really mean is, yes, they're tired, they're frustrated, they're sick and tired of not getting the results, but while they want to get out of pain, while they want to lose the weight, they want to do it healthfully. And in the case of losing weight, they don't want to gain it back. We don't want to say that we just want to lose it fast or that we just want to do this or that. We want to lose it as fast as possible while doing it naturally and permanently and maintaining optimum health and balance in the body. So today we're going to talk about taking weight loss and fat burning to the next level. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss anything. So if you're not getting the results that you're looking for when it comes to weight loss and fat burning, whether it is because you have an extremely stubborn insulin resistance, maybe you have a low basal metabolic rate because of hypothyroid. Maybe you've done a lot of yo-yo dieting in your days that you shut down your metabolic rate. Or you had some trauma or some accident in the past that may have shut your body down. Or if you are getting some results but you just want it to happen faster, you just want to lose that weight faster and quicker. Today we're going to talk about how to pull out all the stops, whether it's for any of those stubborn reasons or you want it to go really quickly. All of these are tools that you can apply, and for some of you, you have to apply all of them to make anything happen. And it's a matter of degree. How much do you turn on the power, so to speak? The very first thing to understand is insulin resistance. We can never get around that because insulin is the hormone that takes glucose and fuel out of the bloodstream and into the cell. And the more insulin we have, the more the cell becomes resistant, and now insulin blocks fat burning. So when we can't lose weight, it is because of insulin resistance. So insulin resistance comes from fructose, sugar, grain and starch, especially processed refined ones, and it comes from how often we eat. The more often we eat something and raise our blood sugar, the more often we have insulin spikes, the more often insulin is guiding fuel and glucose into the cell, the more the cell becomes insulin resistant. And that is the mechanism that we have to turn around. So since all of these things, fructose, sugar, grain and starch, and frequency are contributing to insulin resistance, that is the thing that we have to work at turning around. So a lot of people go from high levels of carbohydrates and then they lower them and they might get all the way down to keto, which means that you are eating so few carbs that your body gets fat adapted. It learns how to burn fat for fuel. But for some people, that's not even enough. So it may not be enough to be in keto. You might have to be in keto and still lower your carbs even further. So you might want to look at getting closer to 0 carbs. Even if you got into ketosis on 20 or 30 grams of net carbs, to really take it to the next level, you want to look at taking it even closer to zero. Then we want to understand protein. Number 2, moderate protein, because protein also stimulates insulin. Excess protein gets converted into glucose and raises insulin and can drive insulin resistance. So it is not okay, if you're very insulin resistant, it's not okay to eat unlimited amounts of protein. Number 3, moderate fat. And this is going to confuse some of you at first, but will help you put it in perspective, because keto is known as a high-fat diet, but it's not really high fat. The keto diet is very, very low carb, and the whole point in getting it low carb is so that your body starts using fat. But the incentive for the body to burn body fat is based on the fact that you don't put so much fat into your mouth via the diet. So if you eat so much fat that there's no incentive to burn body fat, then you're eating too much fat. So we want to start thinking in terms of moderate fat here. We're going to talk a little bit about calories here, but we'll help you explain that also when we get into the intermittent fasting portion. So let's say that the typical ratios during the keto macros are 75% fat and 20% protein and 5% carbohydrate on a 2,000 calorie diet. Then that would be 165 grams of fat, 100 grams of protein, and about 25 grams of carbohydrate. If you start lowering your fat, if you start eating fewer meals, if you do intermittent fasting, if you eat half as many meals, if you become fat adapted and you eat less, now you will consume fewer calories. So now let's just say that you are eating for whatever reason, whether you're not hungry or because you're eating one meal a day or every other day, that you're only eating 1,000 calories. Now these ratios are not going to stay the same. The carbs are going to go way, way low. Remember, we're trying to get down to zero. So the 5% now becomes about half as much, about 12 grams of carbs. And none of that is going to be fructose, sugar, or starches. We still want to maintain approximately the same amount of protein, about 100 grams, but because we're eating less, now that 100 grams become 40% of calories from protein, and the rest then becomes fat. But now fat has gone down to 55%, which is about the same as 60 grams because we're eating less food overall. Again, we might not be as hungry, or we might be fasting part of the time. So now the macros have changed a little bit, and the carbs have gone even lower. The proteins have stayed about the same because we're trying to preserve lean tissue and give the body the proper amino acids without triggering insulin. And we have also reduced the fat in order to give the body a greater incentive to burn the stored fat, the excess storage. So what can you eat? Well, you can eat as much leafy greens as you like, basically, because all of these 12 grams are going to come from leafy greens, from things that have a lot of fiber. 100 grams of leafy greens are going to have about 3 grams of carbs. So you could eat a full pound of leafy greens. That's a full tub of these spring green mixes every day and still not get over 12 grams. And because there's so much fiber, it slows the absorption of that carbohydrate way, way down. And why do you want fiber? Because when you're eating less food overall, when you're eating more concentrated food in the form of fat and protein, and when you're eating fewer meals, there is less gut activity. So some people tend to become a little bit constipated. Some people might have some issues with their digestion. But the main reason that we want to think of maintaining fiber is that fiber feeds your biome, your microbiome, the bacteria that live in your gut. They are being implicated more and more, not just in overall health, but in your ability to lose weight as well. So you want to do everything you can, even on a intermittent fasting or a keto diet, to maintain your fiber. And you want whole food fiber. You want it to come as much as possible from a wide variety of different foods. But we're going to be limited mostly to leafy greens, so try to find as many different kinds as you can there. And what it does, this fiber, it becomes food for your bacteria. And fiber, by definition, does not raise your blood sugar. Fiber is a carbohydrate, but the reason it's called fiber is because you can't absorb it. It can't get into your bloodstream. So it's neutral. It's completely neutral in terms of these ratios. So the more fiber you can get, the better, basically. And when you feed those bacteria, they produce short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids, they can become fuel for other bacteria. They become fuel for the tissues in your gut, and some of it can even start circulating and become fuel for you that is very, very beneficial. They're basically the shorter version of MCT. So short-chain fatty acids, or MCT, is medium-chain triglycerides, medium-chain fatty acids. So this is kind of part of ketosis. And what they also can do is they can help improve insulin sensitivity. They can help reverse that insulin resistance. But again, the biggest reason is that you want to do everything you can to maintain your gut activity, because everything slows down a little bit when you eat less. So the more you can do to keep up that activity, the better. The other thing you can eat, of course, is meat, fish, eggs. You can eat healthy animal proteins. You want to try to stay as much as possible to grass-fed and organic. But again, you do the best you can. If you can't access it, or if you don't feel you can afford it, then do the best you can. But realize that the grass-fed have much, much better nutrition and inflammatory ratios for you. You want to try to avoid dairy and nuts for two reasons. They tend to be inflammatory. So if you have any kind of sensitivity, nuts and dairy are two of the most common allergies or intolerances when it comes to food. But also they do contain some carbohydrates. Even though they can fit into a normal keto diet in moderation, if you're trying to get really close to zero on the carbs, then they do contain a few grams of carbs. Like a cup of dairy will have about 12 to 14 grams of carbohydrate in the form of lactose. Nuts have anywhere from 4 to 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrates. So if you're trying to get to zero, you're best off not to use any dairy or nuts. The only exception would be if you have like a tablespoon or so of heavy cream in your coffee, or if you use butter, because butter again has some of these short-chain fatty acids and it has no protein or sugar. It's just a pure fat portion of the dairy. Number 5, intermittent fasting. So if you want to kick it up a notch, you want to make things happen faster, then definitely intermittent fasting is a powerful tool, because we talked about the things that drive insulin, and one of the strongest factors is the frequency. So intermittent fasting means that you reduce the frequency. You eat fewer meals, you go longer periods of time without stimulating insulin. So your cells are insulin resistant. So the more you can reduce the things that stimulate insulin, and the longer you can go, the longer period of time that you can go without stimulating any insulin, the more you're going to have a chance for those cells to become insulin sensitive again. So intermittent fasting means that you eat during a shorter period of time, a shorter feeding window, and you extend the fasting window. You could start with 16-8, which means that you skip breakfast maybe, and then you have lunch at 12 and dinner at 8, and you fast the rest. And then you push the dinner a little bit earlier. So now you're having lunch at noon and you have dinner at 6, so you're doing an 18-6. and so on. So you can gradually, as you become more fat adapted, you shouldn't have any problem shrinking down your feeding window. So then you would have a 24 and then down to what's called OMAD, 1 meal a day. But for some people, that's not even enough. There are a lot of people who have so much insulin resistance, such a slow metabolism, that their body just refuses, even with OMAD, to start burning fat. So now you got to take it even further. And you could do what's called a 42-6, that you eat 2 meals one day and then you skip the next. And then you have 2 meals like noon and 6 p.m. and then you skip the next day and so forth. So you have a 42-hour fast out of every 48 hours, out of every 2 days. Or you could eat 1 meal every other day. So now you're basically getting a 48-hour fasting window. And once your body is adapted, once your body is used to that, once you've learned how your body reacts and functions, now you could even stretch that a little bit further. But I don't suggest that you do that right away. I suggest you move slowly, learn how your body reacts, and then you can try a 3-day fast, a 4-day fast, a 5-day, etc. But don't just jump into that. Number 6, aerobic exercise. And aerobic exercise is perfectly fine because aerobic by definition is fat burning. Aerobic means that you can supply enough air, enough oxygen that your body keeps up, and it doesn't need to burn carbohydrates, especially if you are fully fat adapted. Then your body can be burning as much as 95% fat to 5% carbohydrate. That is the ratio that your body gets into once you are fasting, especially extended fasts. So even though we don't want to focus on calories, I just want to illustrate that it can be a powerful tool, because let's say that you have the time and you enjoy walking and you go for 2 hours of walking 5 to 6 days a week. 2 hours of walking, depending on your size and height and so forth, but in my case, if I walk, I can burn about 5, even 600 calories in an hour, and I can remain aerobic, I can remain fat burning. So in 2 hours you could burn 1,000 or 1,200 calories. So even though that's not going to be the primary way, we want to get away from thinking that we lose weight by burning calories, it is an additional tool. So you could burn an extra pound every 3 days. On top of everything else you're doing, that walking could burn an extra 2 pounds a week or so. But here's the big but. Here's the big thing that you have to understand. You have to stay in fat burning. You cannot try to think, oh, well, if I burn 1,000 calories walking, then if I walk really fast, I can burn more calories. That's going to come back and bite you, because if you increase your intensity, now you're no longer in fat burning. You have to stay in fat burning. You have to stay in that aerobic zone where you don't exhaust yourself, where you don't huff and puff, where you're not starving for air. Because as soon as you start huffing and puffing, as soon as the intensity goes up, now you are producing cortisol. The reason you're huffing and puffing is that your body is looking for more air than it can provide for aerobic activity. And now you're not fat burning. Now your body leaves fat burning, or it shifts from 95% fat burning to a significant amount of carbohydrate that it needs to start breaking down to produce energy. As soon as that happens, you increase cortisol, which increases blood sugar, and that increases insulin resistance. So if that just happens for a very short time, no problem. If it happens for seconds or a couple of minutes, no big deal. But if you go on for 30, 45 minutes to an hour and you think that, hey, because I'm sweating, because I'm working harder, I'm burning more calories, you are shifting into carbohydrate metabolism. You still have the fat burning as a foundation, but anything extra has to come from carbohydrate metabolism. So the more you do that, the more you drive your body back into needing carbohydrates. And what happens then? Well, your body has 4 choices. It's going to result in cravings. It wants that carbohydrate because you did something that made the body need carbohydrates. So you're going to get cravings. And you're either going to give in to them and eat carbs again, or you're going to suffer. And if you suffer, you're going to feel terrible, but also the body might respond by lowering your basal metabolic rate because you are producing a need for carbohydrate, but you're not fulfilling it. So now your body perceives a lack and it will lower your basal metabolic rate. The other alternative that is no better is that the body starts breaking down muscle. And remember, cortisol breaks down muscle because cortisol is a stress hormone. When you're stressed, your body doesn't care. It wants to survive this moment at any cost. So it breaks down muscle to make gluconeogenesis, to make more glucose. Don't get into that. If you're doing the walking, it can be very powerful, lots and lots of benefit, but you have to stay aerobic. Anything that you do for more than a few seconds to a couple of minutes needs to be aerobic. Otherwise, you'll end up with cravings, suffering, you crash your metabolism, or you burn muscle. However, number 7, this is the one exception to fat burning, and this is called high intensity interval training. And a lot of people think that I'm saying the opposite thing here, but let's make this really, really clear. When you do HIIT, why would you want to do high intensity right after we said that you can't do any sort of high intensity? Because you only have to do it for a very short period of time to increase growth hormone. And growth hormone increases your metabolism. It raises metabolism, it spares muscle, it builds muscle, and it burns fat. It is one of your best long-term allies. You want to do everything that you can to increase growth hormone naturally by the body's own production without getting into a lot of cortisol. So how do we do that? Well, during a HIIT, I've seen some different numbers. I used to quote that you could increase your levels by 300 to 400%. Now I've seen some numbers lately of 500 all the way up to 2,000% that you can increase your growth hormone from doing high intensity interval training. And especially if you do that training while you're fasting, because fasting is the other thing that raises growth hormone most powerfully. So here's the key to high intensity interval training. Some people think that high intensity is just anything that's strenuous, that when you go to the spin class and the harder you pedal for the 45 to 60 minutes, the more high intensity interval training you do. No, that's just sustained high anaerobic exercise, and that's not what you want. So an example of a proper HIIT would be that you do about a 5-minute warm-up, or 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. You could do that walking. Get your heart rate up to 100, 110, 120, whatever that aerobic range is for you. And you could even jog a little bit depending on what the activity is that you're going to do. And then as long as you do that warm-up, you're still aerobic. You're not producing any cortisol, so you're just doing a little bit more of this aerobic. Then when you start the HIIT, now you go all out. And this is going to depend on your fitness level. If you've never done this before, then you're going to build up over a period of weeks or even months before you're even ready to truly do HIIT. Once you're ready, you go all out for about 30 seconds. And it could be 20 seconds, it could be 30, it doesn't really matter, but it's a short period of time. Then you rest for the same period of time. So if you went all out for 20 seconds, you rest for 20 seconds. Then you go all out again for 20 seconds. And you do this 4 or 5 times. That's all. And your goal is for each time that you go all out, you drive your heart rate a little bit higher. And each time you start the next high intensity, your heart rate is a little bit higher than when you started the previous one. So each time it's like a stair step, that you're raising your heart rate higher and higher. And you should not keep this up more than 3 to 5 minutes. And that's the big confusion. Some people think that, oh, HIIT is so great, but you're lucky. I saw this just the other day. You're lucky if you could keep it up even 15, 20 minutes. No, that is wrong. The whole point of HIIT is that you don't exhaust yourself. You don't try to go as long as possible. You go as intensely as possible, but once you have hit your maximum heart rate, you are done. And this, you learn over time what your maximum heart rate is. Mine right now is 177. I've done 4 or 5 workouts in a row and I've hit exactly 177. So maybe I can squeeze out another point, but I'm pretty sure that's where my level is right now. So don't go try to find it right away. Take some time, build it up. As you do these intervals, you learn sort of where that top plateau is. And now here's the beauty. You went super, super hard. You produced a lot of cortisol, but it only lasted for 3 to 5 minutes. So during this time, you did not use up thousands of calories of fuel. You used up 100 to 150 calories of fuel. During aerobic exercise, I can produce about 10 calories per minute. That's what I can sustain with aerobic exercise. When I go all out anaerobe exercise, like sprints uphill, I probably generate somewhere around 30 calories per minute. I increase my fuel consumption about 3-fold. So the rest of it has to come from a process called glycolysis. I have to break down blood sugar and turn it into lactic acid. So somewhere around 100 calories needs to be converted from glucose to lactic acid. This lactic acid is not being used up. It doesn't leave the body. It goes from glucose to lactic acid, and then the lactic acid turns it back into glucose as soon as you stop running. So you do need some glucose in the body, and I haven't found the exact numbers of where this comes from because your liver glycogen is going to be depleted almost entirely from fasting and from low carb. But your muscles retain some glycogen, and you also have some glycerol and some lactic acid and some other metabolites floating around that you can convert. So for a short duration where you don't need a whole lot of fuel, your body has the resources to perform glycolysis and do that high intensity. And because it's short, it doesn't disrupt your metabolism dramatically. You give it a quick burst, and then afterwards your body can go back into fat burning, and you do not get the cravings and the muscle wasting and so forth. So again, the aerobic is not supposed to wear you down, therefore you can do it almost every day. You could do it every day, but I'm just saying 5 to 6 days a week if you feel like it. The HIIT, you don't want to do more than once or twice a week. This is very, very stressful. You want to make sure that your body is 100% recovered from the previous time before you do the next one. So if you're not super fit, then once a week might be enough. If your body is getting fit and you're recovering faster, then you could probably do twice a week. But I wouldn't necessarily go any further than that because I think you get almost all the benefits of exercise from doing the aerobic and from doing 1 to 2 times of HIIT per week. Number 8, next you want to make sure you get plenty of sleep, because lack of sleep is stressful. It raises cortisol, it messes with your growth hormone, a lot of the growth hormone, a lot of the repair, a lot of the recovery is happening during sleep. And if you don't get enough, then it's like you're just burning your candle at both ends. This also has to do with stress. If you're not getting enough sleep, then your body is being stressed. If you are in a lifestyle situation where you have a lot of stress, then you want to do everything that you can to learn some stress management techniques. Breathing exercises, yoga, relaxation, all those different kinds of things so that you can reduce the stress, because that's also going to produce cortisol. It's going to maintain your insulin resistance. And remember that virtually everything we're talking about here is to reduce insulin resistance. That is how we achieve permanent weight loss. That's why all of the yo-yo diets fail, because they don't address these points. They think it's all about calories, and they don't reduce the frequency of meals. They just reduce calories, and now your body is still insulin resistant, and it will do whatever it takes to get back to that initial weight after you lose a few pounds. So that's the key, reduce insulin resistance. Number 10, we want to look at some nutrition, because if you're fasting, if you're doing extended fasting especially, then your body can lose some minerals. Once you lose your glycogen, you're losing fluids. And part of the problems with a low-carb diet is when people don't eat enough leafy greens and when they don't get enough minerals. These things usually sort themselves out fairly well because your body adapts and gets better at maintaining and preserving minerals. But it's still a good idea, especially during long fasting, to make sure that you get enough potassium, that you can get that through food, of course, but potassium citrate is a great supplement. Just get an extra 1,000 milligrams or so on top of your food and you should be fine. Sodium, that's your regular salt, but you want to make sure it's either Himalayan pink salt or a good quality sea salt so that it's not processed and so that you get the full spectrum of trace minerals along with it. Magnesium is a great calming mineral. It stabilizes neural membranes and it helps reduce stress. Or the other way of looking at it, a lack of magnesium can result in unstable membranes and contribute to stress. Calcium is another great mineral, and you want to get it through a natural source or through calcium lactate. So all of these, you can get the potassium, the magnesium, you want to get in a citrate form, and the calcium you want to get in a lactate or citrate form. That's the way that the body can process them and absorb them the best, but also the lactate and the citrate, they fit naturally into the metabolic pathways that actually support the body. Another nutrient is fish oil. You get what you can from healthy fish if you enjoy those, eating fish. But if you don't get enough, then try to get some fish oil, and especially the DHA. That's the longest and the most unsaturated. It is a major component of the brain. It's a building block of the brain. So 40% of the fat in the brain is DHA. Your retina is even more than that, and it has a calming effect on the brain. It helps build the brain, but it's also calming and stabilizing on the brain. B vitamins are necessary for energy production, and they're great brain food as well. Just make sure that they're not the synthetic stuff that you buy from most stores. Don't stay away from the B complex vitamins with thousands and thousands of % of your daily RDA. Those are guaranteed to be synthetic, and they're not going to add anything that your body needs in the long run. Best source is from food and from nutritional yeast. In my practice, we also use Standard Process. They have a natural form called Cataplex B. Something that has created some confusion after a previous video where I talked about insulin resistance. And I'm going to tell you now that you can use apple cider vinegar, you can use small amounts of lemon juice, you can use cinnamon, you can use various different herbs that help your body become more sensitive. And a lot of people thought that I said the opposite in that other video. And here's what I was saying is, if you are insulin resistant because you have too much carbohydrate in your system and your blood sugar goes too high, and then you take apple cider vinegar or lemon or cinnamon or one of those things, and your blood sugar goes down because it helps compensate for that insulin resistance, and then you measure your blood sugar and you say, oh, my blood sugar went down because I took those things, and you think that's a good thing, then you are mistaken, because then you're using these nutrients, you're using these substances to compensate for an imbalance, and it's driving that imbalance further. However, if you are doing all those things, all the things we talked about here today, if you are reducing the carbohydrate load on the body, if your body is in the process of reversing insulin resistance, then these can be a great aid to help the cell become more insulin sensitive, because now you're not overloading the system, you're pulling back. So the cell is in the process of becoming more insulin sensitive, and now these substances will help it in that process. So that's the difference. If your body is overloaded already, then you are kidding yourself if you think this is helping. But if you are in the process of solving the problems, then they can be beneficial. If you enjoy this video, I guarantee that you're going to love that one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.